Hello and welcome back to World 360. Are companies in the US, India, France and Japan helping Myanmar's military build weapons? Why is Russia upset at the UK over supplying a particular type of tank to Ukraine? These are some of the questions we'll be tackling in today's episode. First up, Myanmar. As you know, a military coup took place in Myanmar in February 2021, and since then, the army has initiated a harsh crackdown on civilians, especially pro-democracy protesters. Now, this is a regime that has been accused of gunning down protesters, conducting airstrikes on refugee camps, and even diverting civilian jet fuel to the military. An estimated 760 people have died since the coup, and more than 3,600, including journalists, medical personnel, teachers, and others, have been detained. But a new report seems to indicate that the junta continues to enjoy a robust defense trade with certain companies across the world. The Special Advisory Council on Myanmar, or SAC-M, an independent group of international experts led by 3 former UN officials, has come out with a report titled Fatal Business, supplying the Myanmar military's weapon production. It points out that Myanmar's security forces are well armed with a variety of locally produced firearms like sniper rifles, MA-1 semi-automatic rifles, Uzi replica BA-93 and BA-94 submachine guns. The list goes on. Now, the DDI, which is Myanmar military's Directorate of Defense Industries, however, is still reliant on international supplies and a variety of raw materials, parts and components, and even critical tech for its local production of defense. According to the report, companies in the US, India, France, China, Germany, and Japan, and even some state-owned companies in these countries are continuing to sell critical components to the DDI. The report has compiled a thorough list that names 5 Indian companies such as Sandeep Metalcraft and Tonbo Imaging. They have allegedly sent components like boosters, detonators, caps, igniters, electric detonators, optical sights, and thermal sights to the Myanmar military for production over the last 3 years. France's Dassault has also been named in the report as providing critical tech for the design and test sound suppressor of the MA-3 rifle used by the Myanmar military. Even an American machine tools company, Haas Automation Inc., which incidentally owns the Haas F1 team, has also been named in the report. What may also come as a surprise is that Ukraine and Taiwan, which have both faced challenges to their own territorial sovereignty, have also supplied tools and components to the Myanmar DDI. One Ukrainian company, for example, has entered into a joint project with the Myanmar military to produce howitzers and MMT-40 light tanks. The report goes as far as to advise the home states of these companies to investigate and initiate legal proceedings against them. Now, since the coup in Myanmar, the UN has been pushing for a global arms embargo. An embargo has been adopted in the UN against Myanmar, but it is not binding. Now, while we're on the topic of weapons, let's move on to our second topic about the Britain-made Challenger 2 tank. This is a 3rd-generation British-made battle tank. Over the last few weeks, the UK has been mulling the idea of sending 14 of these tanks to Ukraine, and now it seems to be going ahead with it. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has said that he spoke to Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky in a phone call on Saturday, during which he confirmed that he would send the tanks and additional artillery systems to bolster Ukraine's war effort. The announcement makes the UK the first Western power to supply the Ukrainians with main battle tanks, and Russia isn't happy about it at all. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov went as far as to say that these tanks will burn on the battlefield. The Russian embassy in London also warned that sending British tanks to Ukraine was like putting out fire with petrol. But why are the Russians particularly irked by this? For one, the Challenger tank is a powerful weapon that could provide Ukrainian forces with a more accurate firepower and better protection. But more importantly, this move by the UK may open the floodgates for other European countries to send tanks to Ukraine. We could end up seeing the German-origin Leopard 2 tanks, for example, on the battlefield as well. The potential geopolitical ripple effects of this decision by the UK is what's important. For our last topic, we're looking at Greece. where one man is still trying to clear his name in relation to the country's debt crisis of the late 2000s. Before we begin, I want to remind you of the 2008 financial crisis in the West, which had a particularly large negative impact on the GDP growth rates in Greece. By 2009, the situation in Greece had become so bad that Greece's budget deficit exceeded 15% of its GDP. The fear of default was palpable. In 2010, Greece admitted that it was on the brink of defaulting on debt. To avoid this, the EU loaned Greece enough to continue making payments, and Germany was among its biggest lenders. Now, the man who a lot of this chaos was pinned on was Andreas Georgiou. In 2010, when the Greek debt crisis had reached a head, Andreas was appointed as president of ELSAT, the highest statistical authority in Greece. The following year, however, he was accused of inflating fiscal figures during the debt crisis and worsening the country's financial woes. He was also accused of estimating the country's deficit at very high levels, forcing it to borrow more than what it may be needed to. These lawsuits against him were filed by the statistical authority that he was part of, the ELSAT. These were criminal lawsuits, mind you, and Andreas was forced to resign from the ELSAT in 2015. Later, these charges brought before Greek prosecutors were dropped, and the case was formally closed in 2019. Andreas, however, was convicted for breach of duty. However, in recent days, Greece's Supreme Court has been hearing Andreas's appeal against a civil conviction for simple slander regarding remarks he made defending his calculations. Some observers have described Andreas as a scapegoat for the Greek debt crisis, especially after EU investigations found that Greece systematically understated public spending and provided false data to Eurostat in the 2000s, which sowed the seeds for the debt crisis. Andreas has received a lot of support from analysts and statisticians across Europe. International Statistical Institute, or ISI, which is a professional association of statisticians based in the Netherlands, published a report regarding the case, in which it noted the final decision of the courts exonerates Andreas Georgiou and his two colleagues of the very serious charges that were leveled against them, and by extension confirms the professionalism and integrity with which they undertook their duties. Amid the Supreme Court case, Andreas has also got support from those protesting at the Greek embassy in Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for watching. This is Pia Krishnankutty for ThePrint.